trash.
Yep.
Because
Exactly.
that'll mess up
Yep.
the water and,
Exactly.
Thank you for
Right.
pointing that out.
right, I was asking to have you affirm that, because I've had to.
We will
have
do that.
discussions in my household about that.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thanks.
That's all I have.
Hi, I'm Kathy Wessel. I don't know if you need to answer this. I might be the only one who is not sure of this, otherwise I can Google it and not take your time. I'm not sure what vaping even is. Is there?
You want to take it or I can?
Or if I am, I'll just Google it.
Sure. So vaping is the process. They are commonly referred to as e-cigarettes, which are kind of actually old-fashioned now. E-cigarettes are the ones that actually look like cigarettes, except they're plastic. But what they are is they are a device that has a unit that heats up a liquid into vapor. And so that's what you inhale, rather as a cigarette is burned, so that's a combustion process. So vaping is just short for vapor, and you can use different kinds of products. So when you see around GT vape stores, they're big in this area, they sell both the e-juices, so that's the stuff that you put in them, and mostly it's nicotine, okay, with some vegetable oil and some other stuff in there. But the problem with vaping is that it can also be used, you can vape alcohol, you can vape marijuana, you can vape hash oil. It's unfortunately, they say they don't market to kids, but the e-juices come in lovely flavors like raspberry and unicorn, fluffy dreams and cotton candy and all these weird stuff. They can even mix their own special blends in the vape stores, which is one of my big problems because there's really no labeling requirements here yet in Michigan, or at least not that anybody's following. So they will hand write, 2% nicotine, and this is raspberry, mango, coconut, or whatever. But they mix that stuff in the back room, so you don't really know what's in it, for one thing. Then there's a lot of problems with just the hand-to-mouth contact, so you can pass on communicable diseases because the kids are passing these modules, a mod. Mods are kind of passé too. They're bigger, they hold more e-juice. There is a potential, it doesn't happen a lot, but because these devices heat up, they can explode and also cause fires.
Okay, so they're not, I always assumed it was just nicotine. It could be something.
Oh, it could be something else. Oh, absolutely. And yeah, they see it all the time. And
So a student could be in your school
Wouldn't even know
vaping
Right.
alcohol?
right,
Could be.
yes,
Or marijuana.
Or marijuana.
Anything.
Especially
Yeah.
hash oil.
Mhm.
yeah. And they make them. And honestly, and I'm in all the schools in the area. I mean, we don't see a lot of that drug activity. It usually is, but a lot of the kids, because they've heard the message about tobacco and cigarettes, they say, "Oh, mom or dad, I don't do the kind with any nicotine in it." And that's not usually true. Even a lot of the e-juices that say they don't have nicotine, they've been tested by independent laboratories, and they do have a certain amount. And then the other thing that's out there, and I can't even believe I'm about to say this, but I had a reputable doctor tell me, "Oh, no, vaping's great for people who are trying to quit smoking." Well, that's how it really got popular, is when we really cracked down on tobacco and smoking in public places. Then the people that made these devices were like, okay, well, you can't smoke in bars and restaurants and wherever anymore, but we didn't have anything on the books, and a lot of people didn't even know what it was. And so that's when we started to see more of them.
Well, that's what I thought it was, just to help you quit smoking.
Nope,
I'm like,
not always. And they do advertise them that way. And there is kind of there have been some studies that you can do a step-down method if it's supervised by a tobacco prevention specialist kind of a person. But most of the time, that's not what's happening. And most kids who start vaping, because it's so much like actual smoking, they get addicted to the nicotine and they end up smoking regular cigarettes. So that's what vaping is.
Okay.
If I can follow up with that, hold on. Two things, if I can remember them both now. But it looks like candy, okay, some of that. And I kind of think about really little tiny kids who see those pods that you put in the washing machine. And that's kind of the older kids are seeing this as kind of, okay, it's not gonna hurt me, and I think that's kind of it.
Yeah.
I do believe there's one school in the county that has purchased, or maybe I'm letting the cat out of the bag, I don't know, I don't want to mention this, it's out there, that has vapor sensors that they could put in their bathrooms. So that's another thing that's out there. They're a little bit costlier, but we do have school policies. We follow policies for vaping similar to cigarettes and other things like that, so.
And
Okay.
one thing to that vaping as well, and you all know, the vaping scents and oils are commonly great. Pungent orange, strawberry, very strong fruity smells, and this is to hide the smell of marijuana in their clothes and their hair. They use a lot of dabs and oils in them, and though they were originally started to help with smoking cessation, it didn't take long for the dark side to figure out, hey, you can sit right in school. You know the Monster Energy drinks and the Red Bulls with Jägermeister? Jägermeister, you can smell it. As Superintendent Carmine said, these vodkas, Chet was talking about vodkas, was talking about, especially vodka and gin are used commonly right in front of teachers, right in front of parents. And a lot of parents trying to work with their kids on drugs, knowing they're hanging out with the wrong people and doing some of these things, are trusting their kids a lot, but they like to give them a hug when they get home. So you give a kid a hug, you can smell if they're smoking cigarettes, smell if they're smoking marijuana. Vaping eliminates that. You smell like grape. Oh, Mom, I wouldn't do that. It's just grape flavor. Then why don't you drink a grape juice? Why are you paying the money? Why are you putting something in your mouth and sharing it? When you buy a grape drink or a Coke, do you give it to everybody? No, because you don't want to get their cold sores. You don't want to get their flu. But why do you pass it around? Well, we know why they pass it around. So I just want to throw that out. When you smell these pungent odors, they're pulling one past parents and schools and so forth.
Mary, and then I see Sally's hand over here, and then
Okay,
we'll see how much time we have left.
okay, Mary Tonneberger, Omina. I have two items. One is in response to vaping. This is just an observation. I live near M22, and M22, MDOT was repairing M22 last week, and I got caught right opposite the man who was, slower stop. Well, it was about a 20-year-old guy who was probably bored out of his mind, and that was going to be my question. And I had a nice chat with him because I was first in line, and lo and behold, he was vaping, standing there, waiting all day long, moving a sign. So it leads into my question on, and sort of connecting the dots across all of you. Boredom, broken homes, 11-year-olds, schools having to fill in the gaps with all this. It is a really crisis in terms of how a community will come together. So I certainly applaud you for addressing this. Thank you.
I saw that.
Oh, thanks, Mary. Hi, I'm Sally Neal. I'm a board member of Harm Reduction Michigan. We're a small 501c3 that does a lot of outreach. And I just wanted to tell you quickly, we would like to be part of your organization if you're so willing. Also, we've done a lot putting naloxone in the community. We were in the beginning of giving it to the EMTs and the police departments and so forth. Yeah. And monthly, we have overdose prevention and recognition and prevention workshops at the Traverse Library. And you can find out about those on harmreductionmichigan.org or call the library, the Traverse Library. The other things we do are clean needle exchange. We've just proposed that, and we had some objection from the sheriff in Traverse City, but overall, if you've done the research, clean needle exchange saves lives, saves people from using dirty needles, and it is not a promotion of drug use at all. We also do HIV and Hep C testing, so we're available to help people understand overdose and how to respond to it. Two of our board members are nationally known as addiction specialists, Pam Lynch and Maya Doe Simpkins, and they're available to talk to people and organizations about addiction. Thanks for listening.
How we doing on time here? Tricia, you're in charge of it.
Oh, I don't know.
Are you able to stay for a little while longer? Oh,
I
okay.
can.
If we run out of tape, that's the way it goes.
She could repeat the
The
contact.
harm reduction?
harmreductionmichigan.org.
And Maya Simpkins presented at the conference that we were at.
She did, and actually Pam has been to a couple of the Leelanau Coalition meetings. I think she's.
And if people want to know.
She's at the treatment work group, I think.
If people want to know what harm reduction means and what that is, just Google harm reduction. And there's a whole philosophy about it, about decriminalizing the use of drugs and taking drug users, substance users, where they are and meeting them where they are and working with them just like you guys are.
Yeah, it's about safety.
About
Right.
safety or
It's-
There's
safety.
many paths to recovery.
Safety, yeah.
Or to-
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
About safety is a big part of harm reduction.
Tricia, then I'll go to the other side.
So this is a question for John. When you were showing your statistics, you were using percentages for Leelanau County.
Sure.
Do you have any idea what the numbers are? What were the numbers that your sample size,
Well,
for example?
if you're looking at the percentages, we're talking about 7% of youth report binge drinking in the last 30 days in Leelanau County. All we'd have to do is take the number of students in high school, because it's a high school, and that study was done by Munson 2 years ago, but the number of students in high school, so you're looking, what, 400?
400 to 500,
Yeah, students, and so take 6% of 400, you're looking at 25, 30.
That's your caseload, right?
Yeah.
So, but
And
even before those statistics, you had a couple of slides where you showed marijuana in the past year. Your slides where you were
yeah,
showing in the
that
past year. and you
that
showed
past year
percentages
use
there.
for marijuana is much higher than lots of the 30-day studies, because that shows a past year use. A 30-day study usually indicates that a person is using regularly.
Ongoing.
Yeah, versus a 1-year study which shows, which most youth are in experimental use of drugs or alcohol, and experimental use just means what it is. They experiment with something, and so if they use once and then 1 year from now they've not had that problem or haven't used, that's still a year of first use, which is a good indicator to me of possibly developing a problem. But lots of people, even in that experimental stage, will not develop into a longer term use, which then turns into an addiction. So that's just experimental use.
I wanted to make a point for people to make it
Sure.
more real. You know, these aren't just numbers, these aren't percentages. These are kids
Kids.
in our community. And I don't think I'm venturing to say, I have a 16-year-old daughter who's in our high school system. And I would say that there are far more students than that are vaping, and that are vaping marijuana, and definitely nicotine. And it's happening right in classrooms. So it's great that somebody wants to install some sensors in bathrooms, but it's tucked up their sleeve while they're in math class. And they're vaping. I know kids that were vaping all last year, and they're not on, some of them are on John's radar, but not all of them are making it to John. And they need to be on our radar. So I'm grateful for the awareness about what, like, people who know what vaping is, and Chet showing his keys, and that the kid could have something tucked up their sleeve. There's more we can do. Thank you.
We had a presentation last month about the ballot initiatives. We had a presentation about the ballot initiatives, but nobody talked about the marijuana legalization. And it's something we're going to have to make a decision on, and I'd be interested in the three of yours opinion about that.
Here we go. Well, here,
Proposal
go
to
ahead.
legalize marijuana is what we're talking about.
Okay, I
November
just
6th
have to
ballot.
say two things. I actually gave an educational marijuana presentation to the community collaborative. Was that the one where, or was it a different
No,
presentation?
different program.
Okay, so I gave
We
one.
had no speaker on that one.
Okay, and I'll tell you why, and I can't give my opinion, but I can tell you why I can't give my opinion. So, because my agency gets some trickle-down federal funding, some federal block grants, if I give you any kind of education that might lead you to believe that I'm trying to sway your opinion, that's considered lobbying. And this is such a topic that the pro-marijuana side has really stirred up some fear, some strong-arm fear. So those of us in prevention really are not allowed to talk that much about it because we get a lot of dollars to do what we do. And I know that seems really counterproductive, but that may be why you're not hearing a whole lot of people that are in this business really strongly saying what they'd like to say. How's that? I don't think I'm gonna get myself in trouble.
Either of the other yous have an opinion or comments, the pros and cons from your point of view?
I can give a little bit. You'll hear differing statistics, like the fact that Colorado, who's the first to pass it, and I'm going to talk about youth because that's who I work with. Youth use rates in Colorado are at about 50% higher than youth use rates in other states nationwide. However, before legalization, youth use rates in Colorado were still 50% higher, meaning that it did not really increase youth use rates as much as they thought it would. One of the main reasons youth use any substance is because of accessibility. If it passes, it will obviously be more accessible. So when I talk about youth use rates, accessibility is why you start with alcohol and tobacco, because they're some of the most accessible. And we've been really successful at putting down youth tobacco use rates. I mean, youth tobacco use rates are significantly down over the last 20 years, and that's because of prevention efforts, mostly universal prevention efforts that talk about the harms of smoking and those kind of things. But as far as marijuana goes, accessibility is one of the main reasons that youth would begin to use, and obviously if it passes, it will be more accessible.
And just
So-
to go back to the science, it's proven over and over again, it's bad for young developing brains. You can lose up to about 8 IQ points if you're smoking a lot of marijuana when you're young. And as I've said to quite a few young people that have argued with me, it's like, you don't have any IQ points to spare, okay? Would you want to do that to yourself? So, say it.
You want to talk for 1 second, Mike, before I finish up? Or?
Can I just say something real quick on that? Do some soul searching thinking, because I'm not trying to tell you, Sheriff, I'm going to tell you exactly the way it is. The marijuana smokers, the marijuana users, the dab users, the hash oil people, just keep this in mind. I want you as parents, as community members, that was so right what you said about these are our children, these have names and faces. I want you to think, what job would you want that person working in where you trust their children with them? Do you want them a forklift operator where your kid works? Do you want an airplane pilot? You want a police officer? You want a school bus driver? A child psychologist? Do you want them to be a dope user? Just give that some thought. And I have to go to another meeting 1:30, but I wanted to make sure I express that. There's nothing I can personally think of that would be a good idea. And think of these kids, when they have marijuana and drug convictions, they can't get jobs. No one wants to hire a known doper. So they're really messing up their career for this experimentation phase. These are children. I think it's really important, so give it some thought. Thank you so much. And thanks for putting this on. This was very, very well done. Thank you.
And I'm not tied to any federal funds, but I'm going to speak on behalf of me and not our county schools. I echo what the sheriff just said. I certainly there's a place for medical marijuana. I have relatives that use that and need it because he has ALS and then it's really bad. But the accessibility for our kids, we need to have the message out there that it's just not right. Grown adults, whatever they make their choice, that's their choice. But I still echo what Sheriff said. I think we need to look hard and fast at that and be careful, because, it's the way it is, so, thank you.
I guess that'll, Suzanne? One more.
It was not Marion, but I was speaking with a judge candidate a week ago, and I was surprised. We were talking about drugs coming across the border, and he said the worst is methamphetamine. And I have not heard that commented on. We know it can be made in homes, trailers, anywhere. Could you make a comment on that, please?
I can. It's a lot easier for the large manufacturing facilities, so when they talk about coming across the border, they're most likely talking about coming from Mexico. There's about 5 large Mexican cartels that reside in Mexico and can make large amounts of methamphetamine for low cost and then transport it across the border. Whereas those cartels are somewhat down on the production of things like marijuana and things like that because people can grow marijuana. States have legalized it, so there's more accessibility that way. So it's actually cut down on criminal activity when they legalize marijuana in other states regarding to transport of drugs and those kind of things, cut down on some of those cartels. But when it cuts down on one area, then they're going to focus on another area. So does that answer it for you maybe a little bit?
Are you seeing much use in our county or five-county area?
Well, I focus mainly on youth, and I have not had a single youth methamphetamine case come through in the last 5 years that I've been here, but
Because I cover 3 counties, exactly what John said. When you make inroads in one area, it's all about supply and demand. So just like when you crack down on prescription drug abuse, your heroin goes up. So then you crack down on heroin, and believe it or not, even though you get a different feeling from them, people will turn to whatever is available, especially if they're desperate. And so that's why we've seen a resurgence of meth. Whoever you talk to was not wrong. From what I know from my law enforcement contacts, not so much in Leelanau County, but to the east of here, we've seen, sort of to the southeast of here, we've seen quite a big resurgence in meth. And meth is the ugly drug. It's really scary, and it does horrible things to you very quickly, but it's cheap and it's easy to get a hold of. And
has similar effects. And if you're worried about opiate overdose, which some people are worried about heroin overdose and stuff like that, they'll turn back to methamphetamine as a drug to take.
Yep.
So.
Well, once again, we want to thank all our panelists and encourage you to come to our follow-up workshops on the 15th, 16th, and 17th in the evening. Take the flyers, and we'll continue to advertise that. And once again, thank you very much. Very informative.